Our top candidates vying to replace longtime Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky in the Northside 9th Congressional District. They face off only on Fox Chicago.
And welcome everyone to this Chicago Report 9th Congressional District primary debate. A reminder, Election Day is March 17th. And before we begin, some housekeeping. As with all of our debates, the format is a panel discussion that I will moderate. There are no opening or closing statements or time limits, but I do reserve the right to cut guests off if they speechify, grandstand, or filibuster. And because there are so many candidates in this race, we invited those polling above 5%. And a new one out today from Public Policy Polling shows 6 candidates in that field. They are Daniel Biss, Kat Abu-Ghazaleh, Laura Fine, and they are the top 3 with Michael Simmons, Bushra Amiwala, and Phil Andrew also polling at or above 5%. Now, we'll have 2 separate panels tonight. The top 3 get top billing for this hour, but we will cut away sporadically to the next 3. We'll also exclusively feature that second panel for a half an hour. They're there on their own to air on all our digital platforms. This airs 6 to 7 tonight on Fox 32 right now, as you're watching, of course. So, since we have that out of the way, let's meet our main panel in the order they appear on the ballot. Daniel Biss. Mr. Biss is in his second term as mayor of Evanston, and prior to that, he served in both the Illinois House and Senate. He's a former mathematics professor at the University of Chicago. Laura Fine. Ms. Fine is a second-term member of the Illinois State Senate. Prior to that, she served in the House and as clerk of Northfield Township. And Kat Abu-Ghazaleh. Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh is an independent political analyst and influencer who has worked for Mother Jones, Zeteo, and Media Matters, among other outlets, and she is originally from Texas. Thank you, everybody. We have a lot to get to tonight, a lot of candidates, but we do appreciate you being here in this all-important race. So let's get right to it. Starting with the issue of democracy, which is the top polling issue in your district. Love or hate Trump, Daniel Biss, it's clear that he's consolidated power in the executive branch. Congress is nowhere to be seen on issues like tariffs or war powers. What will you do on day one to reassert the role of Congress and to strengthen the checks and balances of democracy?
Well, there's 2 different parts of this. Part of it is just literally using the function of Congress to hold the president accountable. That means hearings, it means using the subpoena power, it means impeachments, not only of the president, but of other executive and judicial branch officials. All of this is necessary, but I think it's also worth just zooming out for a second. How did we get here? Congress has relinquished its responsibility, not just in the Trump era, but for longer than that, backing away from its role as the legislative branch, passing laws to actually solve the country's most significant problems, and backing away from its oversight role. And we need people in Congress who are prepared to be muscular and aggressive and fearless in reasserting that role. When Congress leaves the power vacuum that it left, the outcome that we've gotten should not be a surprise.
Specifically, Laura Fine, on the issue of elections, there's concern about Trump's impact on the upcoming elections. What will you do, day one, to strengthen democracy, reassert the role of Congress, and reassert checks and balances?
Absolutely. This is something, when I'm knocking on people's doors, that they're talking about. And it's very personal to me. I spent many years teaching in the political science department at Northeastern Illinois University and teaching a study of the Constitution. I feel like this administration has taken our Constitution, ripped it up, and thrown it away. It's time for Congress to act. We cannot wait any longer. And in addition to what Mr. Biss had said, we also need to start looking at the Supreme Court. We need to expand the Supreme Court. There is nothing in the Constitution says that it needs to be limited to 9 members. We need to not only expand the court, but we need to put term limits on. What the court says stays for a lifetime, and we have to live with those decisions. And up until this past week, we've really seen a court in Donald Trump's pocket.
And before I get to you, Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh, a show of hands, expanding the Supreme Court, term limits for the Supreme Court, who supports that? All 3 of you. Okay. Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh, day one, reasserting Congress, strengthening checks and balances, strengthening democracy.
Paris, I do want to issue a little correction. As much as I respect the term of influencer, I'm a researcher and journalist who has done original reporting for Mother Jones, Media Matters, Zateo News, and my specialty is actually fighting the far right. Everyone that runs our country now, Stephen Miller, Elon Musk, Tom Homan, they are the people I used to report on and win against, and they know that, which is why, like some of the most effective critics of this administration, I'm under federal indictment. But as much as we want to expand the Supreme Court, as much as we want to pass ranked choice voting, I mean, in this race, someone could win with 20% of the vote. I'd rather lose with RCV than win this way. We can't get that done on day one. I think we need to be a little more creative here. Democrats are still operating as if the only levers of power are legislation and votes and conversations behind closed doors. We need to talk seriously about general strikes, about breaking quorum, about exploiting parliamentary procedure to ensure that Republican legislation doesn't get through. Any time spent blocking that legislation is time well spent if it's not terrorizing our communities.
Well, there's a filibuster in the Senate. What could you do in the House on that front?
Like I said, we can break quorum. We can also be using our resources right now to actively feed people, clothe people. We do that in my campaign. Our office at 7016 North Clark Street doubles as a mutual aid hub. If you want to bring by men's clothes, toothpaste, toothbrushes, shampoo, or conditioner, we could really use your help. But the Democratic Party could be doing this at large with its massive donor base.
All right, Mr. Bisson, are there some perhaps extreme tactics Democrats should resort to and maybe not move forward, assuming this is like the 90s or the early 2000s?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, we are dealing with a different kind of threat, and we can't use the old playbook we've used, and that means using every single tool at our disposal. So you're right, the filibuster is an example, and I think all of us are incredibly frustrated that the Senate failed not once, but twice, right? First a year ago, and then more recently in the fall, to use that tool to extract concessions from the Republicans. But the basic attitude we ought to have when the level of emergency is what it is any tool that we can find we use. And that's the approach that I've taken as mayor of Evanston, finding creative mechanisms to keep our residents safe from ICE. I've now been on the phone with dozens of officials in other communities across the country, strategizing together about what ideas can we come up with. It may be difficult, it may be pushing the envelope, maybe on the edge, but it's necessary when you're in this kind of emergency.
Ms. Fine, regardless, Democrats are projected as of now to take back control of the House, but it would likely be a small majority. Lots of bills get passed that don't get the attention that some of the big ones do. Where will you work with Republicans? On what issues?
Well, first of all, there's a line in the sand. I will never compromise my moral values. I am 100% pro-choice, 100% pro-environment, 100% pro-gun safety. I've stood up to the biggest bullies in Springfield, the insurance lobby, the gun lobby, corporate polluters, and I have won. So there is our line in the sand. We do have to find where can we meet so that we can move forward. A great example of this is I chair the Mental Health Committee in the Illinois Senate. My minority spokesperson is very different than I am. She's from Southern Illinois, she's Trump-loving, she's pro-life, she's pro-gun. But we have gotten more done for mental health in the state of Illinois than almost any other state. Because on issues we can agree on, we can put aside our differences and move forward for the people in this country.
All right, Ms. Abu-Ghazali, you mentioned you've taken on the far right in your role as an analyst and as a researcher. Are there areas that you pledge to work with Republicans if you're in Congress?
Absolutely, but we can't compromise basic human rights. I think that some of the most promising places for any bipartisan support is AI and tech regulation. AI is one of the most universally unpopular issues right now, even so much so that Republicans thought that Trump went overboard by saying states couldn't regulate AI for 10 years in his big BS bill. That is somewhere where we can compromise. Also, reversing Trump's unconstitutional tariffs. Republicans are feeling the heat from this tax that he's put on the American people, too. But we also have to talk about the donkey in the room. When it comes to leverage, it feels like Democratic leadership is allergic to it. And in our race, we have a lot of progressives. A lot of people will vote to raise the minimum wage. But will they be pressuring their colleagues publicly and privately to do the same? Last night at the State of the Union, would they have listened to Hakeem Jeffries and watched or stood aside, or would they have gotten kicked out like Al Green did? We need to actually move the party left, and by that, I mean towards the center.
All right, we mentioned this is a bellwether race in terms of where the Democratic Party goes. Show of hands, early on in your tenure, would you vote to impeach President Trump? Other cabinet members, Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, Seems like consensus on that. Let's move over to the economy. Ms. Fine, I'll start with you. What will you do to help constituents in the 9th grapple with the rising costs of goods, utilities? We have ComEd and People's Gas here in Illinois start seeking rate hikes. That's a state issue. But on the federal level, what will you do to deal with these rising costs? Utilities, goods, stagnant wages.
I think you can't talk about rising costs unless you focus on health care. When I talk to my constituents, they are very concerned that they are being priced out of the market. By losing the subsidies on the Affordable Care Act exchange, we're expecting 70 to 90,000 people to go unemployed or uninsured here in Illinois. When those Medicaid changes come in, that's in this bill that I won't call it what they call it by their name, it's going to be devastating, not only to the human beings who are not going to be insured, but also to our entire healthcare system. Our rural hospitals are going to shut down. We're already seeing some of our urban hospitals close down particular departments. This is going to have a huge economic impact because people are going to wait till the last minute before they go to the emergency room to seek help. And this is just not how we can run a healthcare system. Right now in our country, we have to focus on Medicare for all because Medicare or healthcare is a right. It's not a privilege. And I am somebody who has that policy background in healthcare, and I want to see us get that done.
Okay, Medicare for all, though, whoever wins will be dealing with 2 more years of a Trump administration. It would be tough to pass that with supermajorities, depending on the makeup of the House. But Mr. Biss, I'll address this question. Rising costs, stagnant wages, the health care issue.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to get cut off, but there's a lot to jam in here. A few things. First of all, let's reverse Trump's damage. That means reversing the tariffs and the immigration changes, both of which are inflationary. Second, let's look at the specific things. We talked about healthcare. That's a good example. Housing is critical. The cost of childcare, the cost of college. There are specific different areas where the costs are just going up at rates that are way beyond what ordinary working families can afford. So, for example, in Evanston, I've gone to the mat for affordable housing in a bunch of different ways. Approving our first permanent shelter for the unhoused, changing our regulations so that new development has more and more affordable housing in it, using city property to develop all affordable housing so that our neighborhoods remain socioeconomically diverse, and changing our zoning to allow for more naturally occurring middle and affordable housing. So I mention these to say there are specific interventions you can make, and each one of them is controversial. Each one of them requires a fight. Each one of them usually doesn't happen because most people in public office are too scared of the blowback to actually take on those fights. I've shown a willingness to do it. I'll do it in Washington. But last of all, and critically, I think the full structure that got us here has got to be analyzed, right? We have watched for 50 years as the biggest corporations have consolidated and consolidated. They have near monopoly power in so many different parts of the economy. We've seen labor unions shrink in their membership. And so the dial of power has just shifted from workers to corporations, from consumers to corporations. And we have to reverse that. That means enforcing antitrust laws. That means rebuilding a strong labor movement for a 21st century, like through the PRO Act. I'm so proud to be endorsed by the AFL-CIO and many, many labor unions across the state of Illinois. And it also means having a tax policy and wage policy through raising the minimum wage, taxing billionaires, taxing wealth, and closing the tax loopholes, for instance, the carried interest loophole, that have allowed so much wealth and power to concentrate. You've got to have this structural analysis as well as a tactical analysis.
And everyone on this panel is in favor of graduated tax rates, higher tax rates on millionaires, billionaires?
We should tax billionaires out of existence.
So no billionaires?
No billionaires. No one should have $1 billion. That allows you to abuse the economy. It allows you to abuse your workers. I'm a former union rep. I know exactly how hard it is just to get our protections, and yet our government is de-recognizing unions. We have to pass the PRO Act, and we need to make sure that unions can act independently. Like Daniel said, he's endorsed by the AFL-CIO, but I'd love to know how that happened considering a majority of unions voted against endorsing you. And this is the exact type of backroom dealings that we don't know why they happen, but actively minimize union political power.
All right, the AFL-CIO, the umbrella group of labor.
Yeah, so
Get you to respond to
I'm
that.
not sure what that means. The process by which the AFL-CIO makes their endorsement is a vote of a bunch of unions, and it requires a 2/3 majority, and I cleared that majority. And by the way, I'm not only endorsed by the AFL-CIO.
You didn't clear that majority. It was overridden. This was reported by someone in the room the day of.
The final vote which is of the body that is the decision-making body, 2/3 voted for me. And by the way, I'm endorsed by many specific labor unions as well, by SEIU, by the Illinois Federation of Teachers, by many of the unions that represent the working people in our district who have seen me go to the mat. They've seen me fight for working people and for jobs and to raise wages.
What Kat is trying to say is the general populations of the unions did say no. And then it was a small group who did say yes and overrode the general population.
That pisses me off, not as a candidate, but as a union rep.
Ms. Abuzawa, I just want to continue, though, on the issue of affordability, of stagnant wages, of folks getting kicked off of Medicaid and health care. Specific proposals on day one or early on in your tenure that you will enact to tackle these issues.
Yeah, once again, I really want to stress that as much as I would love to pass a progressive utopia of legislation with this president and the farce of the Supreme Court, I do want to be realistic that we're probably not going to get everything. But I do think that there are things that are wildly popular, and especially as material conditions get worse, that we can push. In my ideal world, and this is really radical, I know, everyone can afford housing, groceries, and healthcare with money left over to save and spend. And it turns out that universal healthcare with full vision, dental, mental, and hearing coverage, building more housing with federal incentives to work with local businesses and protections against price gouging actually save us money while having better outcomes. But also, we need to talk about the immediate. Like I said, with the work of actually using party resources to feed, clothe, and make sure people are okay, we need to be doing that with our constituent services as well. I want our office to be the first to institute a chat feature to make it more accessible for people to access as their material needs denigrate.
All right, so all-important role of Congress that goes under the radar is interfacing with constituents who call or come into the office. Ms. Fine, I want to get to the issue of ICE and immigration. We know that Mr. Biss and Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh have been out there protesting at Broadview. They support the abolishing of ICE. Do you support abolishing ICE? And if so, how do you propose the nation enforce federal immigration law?
Absolutely. So I do support abolishing ICE. My state Senate office has done a number of Know Your Rights events, has educated people on what to do if they see ICE in the streets. And just about a month ago, I filed a piece of legislation in Springfield. And this legislation says that if you were hired under Trump's reign of terror, and this reign of terror happens to be these officers who are killing people in our streets. I mean, we have young children in Minnesota who are now growing up without their mother. We have a mother who's going to age without her son because Trump's army murdered them in our streets. My legislation says that they cannot be law enforcement officers here in the state of Illinois. And there's a really good reason why. Our officers work to gain the trust of their constituents. They are trained for years in crisis intervention, mental health, de-escalation. These people who work for ICE, we don't know much about their backgrounds, and they used to get 5 months of training. Now they're down to 47 days. Then they're given a gun, they're given a mask, and they're set free on our streets. And the proof is in the pudding. Look at what's happening as a result of this.
Specifically, Mr. Biss, if no ICE, how does the nation enforce federal immigration law?
I've supported abolishing ICE for years. I came out for that in 2018, a time when, thank God, things weren't as bad as they are now, but they were really bad. And by the way, the writing was on the wall, because what we should not have is a military-style enforcement of borders. It does not make sense to have this army marauding around the interior of our country, allegedly doing immigration enforcement. By the way, what they're doing basically has nothing to do with immigration. It has to do with authoritarian power and control and domination and brutality. And so we have to have a humane, reasonable way to do border enforcement that's not about violence, and it's not about terror. And ICE cannot be any part of it. If you look at the culture, the legal basis, the broad authorities, and the style of this organization, it's got to be demolished, period.
I can give you specifics.
Specifics.
So we need to, first off, abolish and prosecute ICE and DHS. And we return DHS's responsibilities to the Departments of Justice, of State, of Treasury, of Transportation. All of these responsibilities that were taken from those departments, we return them there, and we build an immigration system similar to what we had before ICE, but even better with more federal workers. We need to fully abolish and prosecute ICE. We need to repeal the Patriot Act. We need to lift refugee caps, and we need to offer complete amnesty and citizenship to any immigrant here who has not committed a violent crime. Additionally, we need trials. There is no moving forward without justice. Stern words for Greg Bovino aren't enough. Body cameras aren't enough. We need people willing to put everything on the line, not when it's politically convenient, and not have their hands in their pockets.
Let me ask you this. If ICE has information on known violent criminals in the community who are undocumented, should local authorities cooperate?
We have a justice system that can function without ICE and that functioned without ICE before. ICE has shown that it is completely untrustworthy, that it lies, that it kills, that it kidnaps, that it abuses. ICE should not be seen as any legitimate law enforcement agency, and I don't trust a single thing they say.
All right, I want to get our other three candidates here. I appreciate this conversation so far, but we do have our other three candidates. So I just have a couple minutes. I want to get some of them to respond to what you've heard here. Let's stick with the issue of immigration, because we will have a separate digital panel, and you will get to weigh in on all these issues. First, Mr. Simmons, how does the nation go about enforcing federal immigration law without ICE?
You know, Paris, I'm the son of an Ethiopian asylum seeker, and let's face it, the Democratic Party has tried immigration reform for a generation now, and it just hasn't happened. I'm part of a new generation of people running for office who's going to bring new blood and new energy to this issue. And the reality is that we need a pathway to citizenship for everyone that is in our country, including undocumented immigrants. We need to abolish ICE. I've said that publicly. That's part of my platform. And we need to increase the number of refugees that we resettle in the United States, like my dad, particularly when political violence is on the rise around the world right now. We need to be giving temporary protected status and pathways to people who are fleeing persecution the way America always has done.
And I should mention the 9th Congressional District, a large population, especially in Rogers Park, of resettled refugees. Ms. Amawala, how, though, does the nation does have to enforce immigration laws, so how should it do that?
So ICE is a racist institution. As a daughter of immigrants, I can acknowledge that I've been around longer than ICE has. ICE was created as a response to 9/11 back 23 years ago, and they have a quota system. If you pick up X amount of people in Y amount of time, you make Z amount of money, and they don't uphold due process, which in itself makes it an unconstitutional organization. That doesn't mean Custom Border Patrol goes anywhere, neither does DHS, but ICE as an institution cannot be reformed, and we're in a sanctuary state. That means that ICE and police enforcement can't cooperate, but there is no world in which ICE can be created to be actually efficient in what it was designed to do, and it was pick up and target communities of color, particularly Black and brown communities.
Mr. Andrew, would you abolish ICE? And if so, how to enforce federal immigration law?
Look, I served 21 years in the FBI and our national security infrastructure. The reality is that we need safe streets. And the way that you do that is through high-level collaboration through state, local, federal, and the community. You need trust with the community to keep them safe. And this has been incredibly disruptive to that trust. The reality is that anybody that is a threat to public safety within a migrant community is actually disproportionately impacting that community. So you need trust with that community to be effective. The Chicago area needs 300,000 more residents. That's the reality. We need a federal system that brings a coherent, compassionate approach to immigration. And with that is an enforcement authority. I literally worked with ICE over the course of my career to target those that were a threat to national security, terrorists, and to remove dangerous people from the streets. But ICE was professional. They coordinated with the FBI, the local police. We have politicized this system in a way that it now affects our public safety, and you're seeing it.
All right. So it seems like some sort of broad consensus here, although some nuanced differences. We have a lot more to go, but we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, some of the issues of the campaign money flying around in this race and the super PAC spending that has folks all abuzz. Stay tuned. We're back, and let's reintroduce our guests over there. We have Mike Simmons, Bushra Amiwala, and Phil Andrew. And here, running for 9th Congressional District, Daniel Biss, Laura Fine, and Kat Abu-Ghazala. Ms. Fine, your opponents have talked about AIPAC a lot, the Israeli lobby. They've reportedly supported a group called Elect Chicago Women. They've spent upwards of $1 million or more in this race, ostensibly supporting you and attacking your opponent, Daniel Biss. Do you accept the support from AIPAC?
It is an independent expenditure. It's dark money. Our campaign does not coordinate. I have asked publicly for them to reveal who their donors are because we don't know.
This is Elect Chicago Women, this PAC? And again, per federal law, there can't be coordination between campaign and PAC.
There is no coordination. And again, this is something that I'd like to do when I go to Congress. We need to eliminate Citizens United. We need to get dark money out of politics. Quite honestly, I like the way some European countries do it, that say you have X amount of dollars and 2 months, go for it, that's the election season.
But if AIPAC is funding a lot of this, does that mean that you support their aims, specifically unconditioned aid to Israel?
There's condition on all foreign aid, and it's up to Congress to decide whether or not anybody is not abiding by the law to condition that aid. But I am an independent voice in Springfield. I have stood up to the biggest bullies, and nobody can tell me how to vote. I've stood up to the insurance industry and won. I stood up to the gun lobby and won. I've stood up to corporate polluters and won. There's nobody who can tell me what I'm going to do or how I'm going to vote.
And Mr. Biss, the accusation against you is you were pining for that AIPAC support, or at least to support perhaps a PAC. They've called you a fake progressive. How do you respond to some of those attacks?
Well, that is simply not true. I absolutely meet with all kinds of groups that I don't agree with, including AIPAC. I would never have accepted AIPAC support. And in fact, it was pretty clearly available to me, but I stayed true to my values and took the position that I believe is right, which is that we cannot allow unconditional aid to the Israeli government no matter what they do in Gaza. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's what our district wants. It's not what Jan Schakowsky has done. It's not how she's governed. It's why I would be a co-sponsor of the Block the Bombs Act in Congress, should I be elected. And it may be why I'm endorsed by Congresswoman Schakowsky. But I do think that this point that you make, Senator Fine, about not knowing about the Elect Chicago Women money is just baffling, because your campaign was advertising day after day after day, and your ads went off the air at the exact moment that the Elect Chicago Women ads that were almost the same as your ads went up. You're telling us that's a coincidence?
One, I disagree with you. Two, I don't know if you believe the own words coming out of your very own mouth, because you seem to change direction with the wind. You went to AIPAC not once, not twice, but 3 times asking for their support.
It's simply not true.
When they did not support you, you changed your tune. It is true, because you had a paper, you had a Substack that said one thing, and then you said another.
No,
but
this
is historical. You've come after me for having bipartisan donors, but you've taken almost $100,000 from Republican donors and then did not admit to it. We were actually in a forum where you held up a sign and said, I don't take money from Republicans, except it's all in the reports.
Right.
You also said you'd be mayor for the next 4 years when you were elected. And my question is, how can people trust that?
So literally all of that is
Very
untrue.
quickly, because I do need to get Ms. Abu-Ghazal. If you want to just respond very quickly.
I want to be clear. So all of that is untrue. But more importantly, here is the criticism that you keep running away from. Your campaign is bankrolled by AIPAC and MAGA donors. You had more money from Trump donors the last quarter of 2025 than from our own district. And I think that raises a really fundamental question, which is, who will you be representing when you get to Congress?
I have to respond to
Just
this.
very quickly.
I have a handful of bipartisan donors, about 3% who've donated to my campaign. Anybody who's donating to my campaign, I'm sorry, I just need to finish, is donating to a woman who has a record of being 100% pro-choice, 100% pro-environment, who again has stood up to the biggest bullies and won.
Right.
Anybody who's donating to my campaign knows that if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, I'm willing to raise your taxes.
All right,
this is what they're
I do want to
supporting.
bring Ms. Abu-Ghazala into this. We did get an email from 9th District resident Stephen Levin. He sent us a tweet
Wait, real quick before we get
Go ahead
to
and
that.
respond.
This is the exact type of hypocrisy that people are sick of in politics. over and over again, the lying, the bickering over who likes AIPAC more, the idea that you can separate yourself even after meeting with them, even after pushing an organization that supports this administration and that is supporting a genocide is not a group you should meet with. And frankly, both of you are trying to push policies that, even if you're supporting the Block the Bombs Act, have a lot of very precarious and dangerous implications, such as anti-BDS legislation, such as not conditioning certain aid. We need to ensure that we are following our own laws and not lying about who we are or who's supporting us.
Okay, so speaking of Israel and Palestine, Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh, we got an email from 9th District resident Stephen Levin, who brought up this tweet of yours from 2024, responding to President Biden's criticism of Hamas. It said, pretending October 7th was motivated by ancient desires to kill Jews is not only wildly racist, but wrong. Like 99% of attacks in history, both by military and terrorists, October 7th was not in a vacuum. It had motivation, which is why they took hostages. Is this somehow saying that the October 7th attack was justified?
Not at all. That's not at all what I was saying. But what I'm saying here is, first off, regarding President Biden's comments, where he described that as motivated by ancient desires. That is a very loaded statement, I say as a Palestinian person, that implies that there is some bloodthirst between Palestinians or Jewish people. And it's dangerous to both of us. Our lives are inextricable from one another.
He was referring to Hamas. He was referring to Hamas specifically.
But even then, Hamas is in Gaza. It's being associated with Palestinians by both the Biden government and the Trump administration. And so you can't just look at their actions and hear their words and not see a relation there. Additionally, for the second part, I think it's important to mention that, yes, it didn't happen in a vacuum because of Netanyahu's far-right government and because of a pattern of discrimination, a pattern of second-class citizenship, a pattern of exile, and a pattern of displacement that my own family underwent. And my position on this is really not that radical. Every civilian deserves to be safe. No child deserves to go to bed hungry. Every war criminal should be held accountable. And Palestinians deserve we should recognize their statehood so they can negotiate a solution on equal footing.
Netanyahu, do you all consider him a war criminal? Would you support international war criminal charges? One hand up.
I mean, we should participate in international processes. There should be thorough investigations, and I think the answer is likely going to be yes, absolutely.
I don't think it's not likely, yes, it is.
I want to be clear about one thing here, which is very important for people who are concerned about this issue to understand. AIPAC is attacking one candidate in this race. AIPAC is attacking me and only me. They see me as the biggest threat to their agenda. They see me as the biggest threat because they know I'll be an effective critic of the Netanyahu government when they act the way they have, and they know I'll be effective at building coalitions to actually end the nightmare and bring about peace. And that's what I'm going to do in Congress. AIPAC knows it. I think the voters of the 9th District do too.
I think there's something else that's missing here that we have to discuss. You can love your country and disagree with your leadership. I love my country. I don't like Trump. I love Israel and the Israelis. Netanyahu has to go. And I've been saying that for a very long time, way before October 7th. But I think right now what we need to focus on is, how do we get to a two-state solution? How do we make sure there's safety, peace, and dignity for the Palestinians in Gaza and the Israelis?
What about the West
Israel?
Bank?
The West Bank, too.
So, okay, let's focus on the West Bank.
I want to jump in here, because this is
two-state
let's talk about the
solution.
West Bank.
Should there be a withdrawal of Israeli settlements in the West Bank?
Of course.
Yes.
I'm opposed to the settlements.
Should there be a withdrawal of Israeli forces in the West Bank?
Yes, we need peace and dignity everywhere.
Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh, what about the state of Israel? Do you support the state of the right of Israel to exist as a state?
I think that this question is said as if it doesn't exist. What we need is to ensure that any solution, whether that is a two-state, a single secular state, whatever it is negotiated not by America, but by the people that actually live there, by Israelis and Palestinians. This is, my great-grandfather had a hotel. And when they were expelled, he carried around the key ring to every single door in his hotel till the day he died. He was buried.
And he lived in Palestine?
Yes, my father's side is Palestinian. And if someone came to me and said, you could have the hotel, but you displaced 300 people, I would say absolutely not, because trauma begets trauma. But I think it's really important that any solution has full civil and legal rights for everyone living there, regardless of their ethnicity, their religion, and that is decided by the people who actually live there, because we spend so much of our time as a country interfering in other countries and saying that we dictate how they live, and it's just made places worse.
All right, so Palestinian American, 2 Jewish Americans on this panel do believe there is an anti-Semitism problem
Absolutely.
in the United States.
And I've devoted my career to fighting it. I cover the far right. Conspiracy theories are inherently rooted in anti-Semitism, which is why it's so dangerous to align with far right donors, because they're pushing the Great Replacement theory, which has inspired almost every mass shooting of the 21st century.
What about anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Palestinian sentiment?
It's a horrible problem. It's a horrible problem.
And I think we need to go back to something that Kat said that I agree with. When we figure out this two-state solution, the Palestinians need to be brought to the table. Because right now we are in a humanitarian crisis. And we have to make sure that every individual has the opportunity to be fed, to be housed, has health care, has schools. Right now, I think President Trump is making us a laughingstock because he's talking about building hotels and golf courses in Gaza. That's not what the Palestinian people want. They need to be brought to the table to talk about how are they going to rebuild and how are we going to get to this two-state solution.
Can I just jump into something really important? Because I do think that Senator Fine said something critical, which is what's going to get us to a place, and I forget the words you used, but I would say a place of peace and justice, and a place where there are 2 viable states side by side with self-determination, dignity, peace, and security. And the answer is not what we've been doing. The answer is not continuing to give unconditional military aid to Israel. And the problem is AIPAC doesn't want a two-state solution.
Do you support any aid to Israel? Or could that,
Yeah, I
that
support, for example, defensive weaponry. I support Iron Dome.
Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh, any aid to Israel at all?
Defensive weaponry is an oxymoron. Weapons are inherently offensive, and for any
Do you
ally.
support Iron Dome?
No, I don't support any. We need to condition all aid to any country, any ally. It doesn't matter if it's Israel
so
or if
Iron
it's
Dome
Mexico.
was where they shoot down
missiles that are coming in.
Right. If we aren't using our leverage, there is no reason to condition any aid. We absolutely should be supporting our allies, but they have to follow our own laws first. It's not that. You're conditioning aid.
There's more to it. I've been to Israel. I've been in the bomb shelters. I've been to the borders. They are being attacked constantly at every angle. If you do not fund something like the Iron Dome, the amount of death and destruction would be incredible, not just to the Israelis in Israel, but also to the Palestinians in Gaza.
I haven't been to Israel because my dad was scared I would get detained if I went, because that is the reality, even as an American citizen. We actively need to be using our leverage against any ally that is not following our own laws, and we have seen a genocide happening in Gaza. We have been seeing lack of freedom of movement. People are trapped there. They have nowhere to go. They can't even swim away from the border because they will be killed in the water. This is not that difficult. And if we're supposed to be a good ally, then we need to make sure that our allies are following basic human dignity.
All right, Mr. Biss, I want to bring up a quote that the Chicago Tribune Ed Board made about you. They said they weren't comfortable with your aggressive confrontations with agents. And we should mention, there have been viral videos of you and Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh. Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh is under indictment right now for that very thing. But will you continue that type of aggressive, in-your-face kind of activism if you're elected to Congress?
Of course. Of course. I'll do it if I'm elected to Congress. I'll do it if I'm not elected to Congress. I'll do it if I'm the mayor. I'll do it if I'm out of politics. It's critical. It's essential. We cannot win this battle against authoritarianism just inside of government buildings. It requires a movement of people out in the streets. And as mayor of Evanston, with a responsibility to represent my community and protect residents of Evanston, of course, I'm in the streets every day, and I'm going to continue doing that. That is how we beat this back.
And Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh, we mentioned many videos that we've seen you at Broadview. I've been out to Broadview many, many times. Lots of protesters out there, and obviously the scenes of tear gas and rubber bullets, those were horrific. But you are facing federal conspiracy charge for obstructing. How does physically blocking a law enforcement vehicle qualify as free speech? The vehicle was trying to get out and you were physically blocking it.
I can't get into any specifics on my case because that's kind of how legal cases work. But what I will say is that we've pled not guilty because this is a free speech issue. And right now, the Trump administration, which camera am I supposed to look at right now? Because I want to make sure I'm speaking to the audience.
I would say look at the moderator.
Well, the Trump administration is trying to make it illegal for you, Paris, to be able to protest, for you to be able to be in a room with other people and hold you accountable for any actions that might happen around you. They are trying to criminalize freedom of speech. They are trying to criminalize free association, and it's going to
etching
come
the word
for you.
pig into the side of a vehicle. Isn't that property damage?
I didn't do that, and it doesn't even allege that in the indictment. But honestly, that's just kind of falling for the exact same lies that ICE and the Trump administration continue to repeat. We know that ICE lies, and we know that they are trying to find any excuse to invoke the Insurrection Act, to abuse protesters, and to make sure that they scare us into silence. And once again, it's not going to work. And if we don't stand up for it, people with power and platform and privilege, and frankly, the first time I went out to Broadview, the second time and the third time, there wasn't a single elected official out there, then we are just going to get run over.
And Mr. Biss, you were out in Broadview as well, and there are videos about Ms. Fine.
I just want to say I really agree with that. First of all, these people are liars, so don't take them at their word when they make all kinds of allegations, because you know what they said about the murder of Alex Preddy, you know what they said about the murder of Renee Good, and you shouldn't take them any more seriously when they're talking about Kat or anybody here in Illinois. And second of all, we are in an emergency, and we have to do as much as humanly possible. You have to pull every single lever to put a stop to the nightmare and keep people safe.
And so, again, we've seen the two of you, many videos out there. Ms. Fine, we haven't seen that with you. Are you meeting the moment if you're not out there sharing this frustration with protesters?
I feel I am. I've been at local protests, but what's more important is I've been doing the work to get it done, to protect the people here in Illinois from what's going on with the abuses of ICE. As a state senator, I've been proud to help support and champion legislation to unmask ICE, to allow people to sue the federal government if their civil rights are violated, and to put protective barriers around our hospitals and our courthouses. One issue that many people don't talk about that we're seeing is women who are victims of domestic violence are afraid to go to court to get that order of protection because they're afraid that they're going to be kidnapped by ICE on those court steps. That's completely unacceptable, and it's something we have to speak out more and more about to make sure that that is not happening. I can't believe that this is our America. We've got to stand up and make sure that this is not happening, not only in our neighborhoods, but around our country.
All right, I want to, Mr. Biss, you want to chime in?
I just wanted to say I appreciate the work that you're doing in Springfield. I will respectfully disagree with the idea that it's more important than being in the streets. You know, as mayor of Evanston, I've done everything I can inside the government to use the tool of the governments to keep people safe. And I've done everything I can in partnership with the most extraordinary, inspiring resistance movement I've ever seen in my life out in the streets. And I think we need both. And I think the idea that we can live with just one or the other and win in this moment misses the assignment.
I completely agree. I think it should be people's first instinct, elected officials' first instinct, to be out in the streets with people, and not just when it's politically convenient, not even when it's politically safe or physically safe, and get your damn hands out of your pockets.
All right, let's bring in our other three candidates here. Mr. Simmons, because there's such a high population of Jewish Americans and Muslim Americans, Palestinian Americans in the 9th District, very, very diverse district, especially the north side of Chicago. How do you deal with the Israel-Palestine issue? How do you get to a two-state solution?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the 9th District is one of the most diverse communities in America. I'm a product of that diversity. I grew up in the Lincoln Square neighborhood in public housing where within 100 yards of my front door were people from 12 different countries, Jews, Muslims, people who are Buddhist, people who are Hindu, and people from all over Africa. And so that is the point of view that I bring to this discussion. And I've said as a candidate that we have to do everything we can to push for peace in the world right now. That means using our diplomatic powers. That means not over-relying on the defense budget and on the military-industrial complex that is paying for Iron Domes and missile defense systems, but that won't pay for Head Start for our kids here or abroad. That won't pay for international development programs as we used to do with U.S. aid and a bevy of other programs. And so I take a pretty big picture approach to this. And as a member of Congress, I would be sitting down with all of my constituents, but especially those from the Jewish community, those from the Palestinian community, to make sure that they have a voice in how we go to the next chapter in U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, because I think that we, to this point, have really failed.
All right, Ms. Amawala, the same question to you.
I made history being one of the first people of my generation ever elected to public office in this country, and that happened in Skokie, Illinois. That means that when it comes to the struggle of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, they are interlinked, and this is not new to me. I grew up taking anti-Semitism trainings while in high school, and the first thing they teach you is any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. I separate the two. I separate the state of Israel from actual Jewish people, and the conflation of the two is what actually is causing anti-Semitism, which is true Israel, but we cannot be using our U.S. property and annual taxpayer dollars to fund a genocide that is happening abroad, and it's not up to us as American legislators to decide what happens for Palestinians and Israelis and both of their right to self-determination.
Mr. Andrew.
You know, I've worked side by side with the partners in the Middle East to keep people safe from terrorism. I've worked in the streets of Chicago to keep people safe from hate crimes. My team at PAX Group actually designed the hate crimes curriculum for the Holocaust Museum right here in Illinois. The reality is that when people feel safe, they make different decisions. And what we're not talking about here is all the money that's being dumped into this race that clouds people's vision on how to guide people to safety. And whether it's the AIPAC money and it's the big dark money that Dan and Laura are both flirting with and using this as a political football, or it's the way that they're using this corrupt practice of running for 2 offices and dumping central committee funds like Madigan used to into their campaigns. The reality is that nothing changes until you elect people who are going to follow their values, listen to the diversity within this district, and recognize that we all want the opportunity to be heard, to be safe, and to thrive. And this is a campaign that is just parching one part of the community against another. Dan and Laura are doing a great job of that, and it is what is wrong with politics today, and I will have no part of it. I've served for 21 years in the FBI. What we need is to send the largest class of new Congress people to Congress on January 2027, and they need the largest ethical reform of Congress itself, and then extend that to the executive branch.
Thank you. I saw there you made an allegation, I believe, against Ms. Fine. Is that who you're referring to, running for 2 offices?
Dan and Laura.
Both of them, okay. Would you like to respond to that?
I've spent my life as a political organizer and a progressive leader in government, and both of those jobs are important. By the way, I think this moment demands that we actually fight back with effective leadership in government and effective organizing out in the community. And this is why as I always.
So the second 3 panelists, we don't have your mics up right now. We'll have a chance. We'll have a chance later with just the 3 of you to talk about this. All right, Mr. Biss.
This is why I have consistently, throughout my time as a government leader, played a role in the Democratic Party, played a role in supporting progressive candidates, played a role in organizing people on the ground to make change. And I'm seeking a party office to continue doing that. And by the way, to continue in my efforts to clean up the Democratic Party in Illinois, which I've been doing for a long time.
All right, Ms. Abou-Ghazal, another criticism that you faced, the other 5 folks here have lived in this district for a long time. You're a new resident. You moved not long before you announced you were running for this seat. How can folks be sure that you're truly invested in this district? Why did you choose this district?
I wish I had some sexy, maniacal answer for this, but my partner and I moved here to save the onion from being bought by Elon Musk. The deal went through really fast, and so we looked at neighborhoods we wanted to live in, and we decided Andersonville, Rogers Park, Edgewater, and I did not plan to run for Congress, and then I wanted to run in the place I want to live. And now we live in Rogers Park, and our campaign office, once again, 7016 North Clark Street, bring us men's clothes. But it's one of the most diverse places in the country. It's an incredible place to be. And it's also one of the most insanely gerrymandered districts anyone's ever seen in their life. And so we're trying to represent everything from Uptown all the way to Algonquin. And this is also where my family immigrated. This is where my family started their life in America. My grandfather went to college here after the Nakba. This is where my dad learned English. But I also don't want to lead with that because this is a city of transplants and immigrants and refugees in our own country that are coming here for queer rights, reproductive rights, because of climate change. And I don't want to play into this narrative that they can't make a positive change just because they're not from here.
You brought up a great point, the issue of gerrymandering. Obviously, Democrats have tried to sort of meet Republicans in this race to the bottom on gerrymandering. Do the three of you support fair maps? Would you support Congress passing a fair maps law?
If it's federal, yes.
Yeah.
Federal fair maps. Okay, let's get to some foreign policy questions. Mr. Biswell, we talked to Ms. Fine. You want to say something?
I just want to respond, and I do respect what you said and why you're running for office, but I had very different reasons for running for office. I've lived in the 9th District almost my entire life, and I didn't run for office because I wanted to run for office originally. I felt I had to run for office. Almost 16 years ago, when my husband was in a horrific car accident and lost an arm, our insurance tried to cancel us when we needed it the most. So I made it my life's mission to make sure that the devastation that happened to my family, we had 2 young children and we were buried in hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills, that would not happen to any other family. As a result of that, I ran for office. I ran for office to make a change. And the changes I've made have made sure that no family will experience what mine did. That's what's so important. I've taken Illinois from a state that favored industry to one of the more consumer-friendly states in the country. That's my reason for being here. I want to do the same in Congress.
All right, I want to get to more foreign policy issues because we know that there is some saber rattling in Iran. The president has hinted at some kind of military action. I don't know whether Congress is going to assert a war powers vote, but say it did, Mr. Biss, would you vote for armed conflict in Iran or regime change?
Of course not, and the Congress needs to assert its responsibility. And of course we shouldn't go to war in Iran. I mean, my God, Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon, and the way that has been shown to succeed in stopping that is diplomacy through the JCPOA that Barack Obama helped bring about, that Donald Trump tore up. And so this rush to war in Iran is a terrible idea. It's wrong, and the Congress needs to stand up and stop it.
Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh, would you support a vote to attack Iran?
Absolutely not. And, you know, our relationship with Iran wasn't always like this. It wasn't always adversarial. It's because of our own intervention and leading to this regime that it is the way it is. I absolutely support the people that are fighting for democracy there, that are fighting for free speech. But this administration doesn't give a damn about them. We're really going to look Trump in the eyes and say, yeah, you care about protecting protesters. This is an effort for him to cement his power over more of the world and bomb more brown people. It's disgusting. I would vote against it. And also, once again, if he does it, it's another impeachable offense.
Ms. Fine. And what if Iran, I mean, the case the president has made is that they're close to acquiring a nuclear weapon again. I mean, we've been back and forth on this. There was a nuclear deal. There was a supposed bombing of nuclear sites, but now they're saying they could be weeks away.
Well, they cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's a hard stop. But right now, we need to look at diplomacy. We can't bring ourselves into another war, especially we have an unstable leader who's talking about bringing us into a war. And I think we need to take this to the next step. Let's look at our defense budget. If we cut 10% from this bloated defense budget where they can't even figure out where to spend all the money, that could fund something like Medicare for all and really care for the people in the United States.
Mr. Biss, another foreign policy issue. Should the U.S. continue funding Ukraine against Russia, and to what level?
Yes. I mean, there was an unlawful and vicious attack of Ukraine by Russia, and it's important from the standpoint of sovereignty as well as human rights, as well as democracy across Europe. So we need to continue supporting Ukraine.
Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh?
Yes, Putin won't stop with Ukraine. Ukraine is our ally. They were invaded against international law. It's important to continue supporting them and understand that when you stand up, if you stop standing up to bullies, they'll just keep running you over.
Ms. Fine, I mean, should there be conditioned aid to Ukraine? Republicans obviously have been debating amongst themselves what level that they want to continue to support Ukraine after 4 years.
We need to continue to support Ukraine. Like my colleagues on the stage have already said, they're not stopping here. We have a bully in Putin who will go through Ukraine and then keep on going. It's really for national security for the entire world.
It's saying, again, the trends are that there would be a democratic majority in Congress right now. Let's start with you, Ms. Abu-Ghazaleh. In Congress, would you take action to strengthen NATO, for instance, as we see President Trump kind of weakening some of those links?
I mean, there's a part of this that you have to look at the executive branch and what they're doing, and only so much that you can from the legislative side. But I want to be on the House Foreign Affairs Committee to lead with humane foreign policy. I also want to be we need to be strengthening that relationship because it is important, especially standing against men like Putin. We have undermined our trust in the entire world by betraying our allies so many times in just the past year.
All right, Ms. Fine, that same question to you. Is there something, would Congress vote to go against the president? Would they travel to NATO countries? Would they do things to strengthen those ties as those ties have been weakened? And some of those countries wonder where the U.S. stands.
Absolutely. We need to re-strengthen those ties. We cannot be an island. It is up to us to move away from this unstable executive office and reestablish more continuity and consistency with our friends across the globe.
Mr. Biss?
Yeah, of course. The damage that Donald Trump has done to not only the United States, but just the world based upon his reckless conduct, which has really destabilized the attitudes that people have about the United States and foreign capitals across the world, is devastating. It's really, really, really bad. And we're going to have to work very hard to rebuild it. And that's going to be intentional and deliberate and brick by brick. It's going to take a long time because the memories of what he has done are not going to fade quickly from other countries that have completely shifted their whole attitude about how to conduct themselves because they just can't trust us anymore.
Okay, I want to thank all of you. This hour has flown by. We've tried to get to as much as we can. I want to thank Daniel Biss, Laura Fine, and Kat Abu-Ghazaleh running for the Democratic nomination in the 9th Congressional District. And a reminder to all you audience members, we do have the other 3 candidates who you heard some from tonight. They are going to be sitting here on this panel, and they're going to have more time to say the things that they want to say and debate some of these issues. We're going to bring that to you on all of our digital platforms, so please tune into that. And you can catch up on all of our debate series, all 5 debates, streaming right now on Fox Local. Find all of our election coverage at fox32chicago.com/election. I want to thank everybody for being here. I know this is a difficult challenge. There's a lot of candidates in this race. Tried to get everybody in here, and all of you back at home, have a great evening. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody, to our special election coverage here in the 9th Congressional District. You heard from these candidates a little bit in our broadcast, but we want to hear some more from them. We're going to reintroduce them. We have Phil Andrew, longtime FBI special agent and hostage negotiator and longtime resident of the 9th Congressional District. Bushra Amiwala, member of the Skokie Board of Education, also a longtime resident of the district. And Mike Simmons, state representative, longtime state senator, former employee in the mayor's office many years ago, has held many jobs in public life. So thank you all for being here. So Phil, I do want to catch up with you because you had a lot you wanted to get off your chest there. In the end, you had some complaints about some of these three. So go ahead and we'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, well, largely, like the question goes unanswered. You know, Dan and Laura are using these campaign funds, which the Chicago Tribune and many others have called to be unethical and maybe illegal, to be using central party committee funds in a congressional campaign, literally running for 2 offices and funneling that money in.
So there's proof that they're moving this money around here.
Yeah, it's being used to elevate their name and campaign in a congressional race. This is what's wrong with politics, that candidates, that perennial candidates, career politicians, using these illicit sort of political tools to manipulate the vote. And there's dark money. Both of them are using an incredible amount of dark money and running for these 2 offices at the same time. And they say they're there to grow the party, but how can you grow a party by wearing every hat in the party? It's absurd. The Democratic Party polls worse than Congress itself. It polls worse than this president. And we're not building the party because people like this are power gathering and not doing the work of the people.
Ms. Amiwala, is there too much dark money when it comes to at least 2 of these top 3 candidates?
I mean, all 3 of them have had websites that have had very clear elements written on them that they're inviting dark money to spend on their behalf. So to me, it's a form of hypocrisy to call for ending Citizens United, which currently has uncapped amounts of dark money being spent to influence races and elections such as ours. I mean, the 3 of us have lived in this district our entire life, and for us to have been boxed out and served as an afterthought in a panel like this simply because we're not accepting money like that is something that I can't sit idly by without acknowledging.
Right. Understood, but we have to acknowledge that we were going by there have been several polls in this race. They've been pretty consistent that those 3 are polling. There was one that came out today. Those 3 are polling in the top. We can only fit 3 here. We're trying to give everybody their due. Mr. Simmons, do you have a problem with the top 3 candidates here, and are they accepting too much dark money?
Well, I had a hard time listening to Senator Laura Fine, who's a respected colleague, say that she would champion overturning Citizens v. United, but has all kind of dark money supporting her candidacy. And I'd love to see her return some of the money from those quote-unquote bipartisan donors, people who give to Donald Trump, people who give to Ted Cruz, people who give to Tom Cotton, and others who are putting ICE on our streets, who are destroying our democracy, and who are taking away our health care. Those donors are going to want something in exchange. Any of our listeners are not stupid and would be able to figure that out. And so I would love to see Senator Fine return that money. And I've asked her several times publicly if she would do that. I think that money does not belong in the 9th District. I don't think 9th District residents are interested in ICE kidnapping people in places like Algonquin and Evanston and Rogers Park. And so she ought to return that money. And if she did, we might see a more fair playing field in this race.
All right, let's talk about the issue of democracy. It polled as the top issue on the minds of your constituents, and that's what you're kind of bringing up right now. But I'll give you the question I started with the other candidates. Day one, what do you do to reassert the role of Congress? What do you do to protect democracy, protect elections, protect the checks and balances of the 3 branches?
Well, the reality is that work starts well before, and that's the unique opportunity here in the 9th, because whoever wins this Democratic nominee is likely to be the representative. And I'm running, as well as several other of my FBI colleagues and others in the military and former law enforcement, because we took an oath. We took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution, and we take that seriously. We've honored it. And there are folks right now running across the country, and I expect to be collaborating, organizing, as we are already. Literally, former assistant director of the FBI running in Maryland just announced. I expect to arrive January 2027, not to just start the work, but to start implementing the plan to first hold Congress accountable. The highest forms of ethical reform for Congress itself, extend that to the executive branch, including restoring the 17 inspector generals that were removed all at the same time, and then extend that to the judiciary, including the Supreme Court.
And those other three candidates had said term limits for the Supreme Court and expanding the court. Is that something you support?
Well, what I want to hear them say is that they're going to hold themselves to a term limit. I've got a self-imposed term limit. I'm only going to serve five terms or 10 years, if that, because this is an emergency. Who you send now matters. We have to restore faith in our government. This new class of Congress people have to hold leadership in Congress accountable and then extend that to this government. Not many people have the experience of having worked public corruption and worked in the federal government itself. I'm the only one in this race that has.
And on that issue, a ban on insider trading for Congress members, do you all support that?
Easy.
Yes.
Easy. Okay.
Absolutely.
Consensus on that. Well, Ms. Amawala, the same question to you. What are your priorities, specifics? Reasserting the role of Congress, protecting democracy, elections, checks and balances.
We have three branches of government intentionally to have these checks and balances in place. But right now we're seeing that our executive branch controls and influences all three branches of government right now. So as a member of Congress, it's your responsibility to use your legislative power to demand impeachment. I can name three, at least, impeachable offenses for Donald Trump right now. And that accountability comes from only the legislative branch right now. And I'm also in favor of making sure there are term limits on our judicial branch, because we are seeing that folks on the judicial branch are able to push forth Trump's legislative effort and executive effort forward. And thankfully, we saw Trump's unlawful tariffs, which were a tax on the American population, recently overturned. But there are a myriad of other issues that needs to be in place. So expanding the Supreme Court, adding term limits, and impeachment, it starts there.
Mr. Simmons.
Let's start with voting rights. I am half Ethiopian American and half African American. That means on my mom's side, the African American side, I'm descended from people who fought in the civil rights movement so that we could not just have the right to vote for Black Americans, but for all people. And the reality is that Donald Trump and right-wing Republicans in Congress are eroding voting rights, are eroding civil rights while putting ICE on our streets, while doing the insider trading and all the other things that make our Congress a broken institution. Listen, I don't look like your typical member of Congress, and I absolutely do not fit into Donald Trump's vision for America as an Ethiopian American state senator who's passed 50 bills into law in just 5 years, who's the first openly gay person to serve in the Illinois Senate, who wants to run for Congress to fight for all people in the 9th District. That means starting with defending democracy. It's the top issue as far as I'm concerned, because listen, my family came here from Ethiopia to be able to live in a free, sovereign society, and that is being taken away from us. And I'm sick and tired of watching mainstream Democrats who are ineffective, who are poor communicators, and they don't fight for the people that they represent. And I unfortunately feel like some of the people that were on this panel prior to us are from that school of thought. And I am absolutely a part of a new generation that's tired of ineffective leadership and is ready to actually fight to bring down the cost of living and to protect our democracy.
Well, and does that mean some maybe extreme measures that members of Congress haven't taken before, more of disruption, more of breaking quorum, things like that?
Absolutely.
Mr. Andrew, is that...
I think everything's on the table, but I think, look, it starts with yourself. Are you going to hold yourself to a high level of ethical standard? And what we've seen, certainly from Dan and Laura, that they're not willing to, because they haven't in the past. They're willing to participate in this illicit way of campaigning and using campaign funds. And by the way, they are just leveraging up for another office. These are going to be career politicians that want to be part of a process that has actually got us into this problem. And as much as Donald Trump and this administration present incredible challenges, the Democratic Party and the Democrats within that party have been proud of the problem, and they're not willing to admit to it, and they're not willing to clean their hands to do anything about it.
It does seem like an extraordinary moment where the president does not poll well, but neither do Democrats or Republicans generically. A lot of disaffection right now among American citizens. Ms. Amawala, how about the question of costs, rising costs of goods, rising utility costs, health care costs, people losing their health care, housing costs? I know that's a lot. Your platform on that.
First, we must make sure that we break down these oligarchs and monopolies that have been consolidating for the past decade at least. And then second, we must make sure that billionaires, corporations, and these oligarchs pay their fair share in taxes, because right now the rich are getting richer, the middle class is shrinking, and the burden is on the rest of us. That means that we must make sure there's regulations when it comes to these data centers that are being built in our communities. The cost of that energy is put on all of our backs as well. That means that the cost of goods, gas, and groceries should be something that all of us can afford without actually having questions. We're the richest country in the world. There should not be something that is an overthought in that way. So making sure that billionaires pay their fair share in taxes. Second is making sure there's affordable housing options that are tier-based. The affordable housing option that exists for someone that earns $60,000 a year annually versus $70,000 a year annually versus someone who earns $30,000 a year annually are different tiers of people that have different means needed. And then finally, I'm proud of the different things that our state government has done to get in the way of this current administration that has gutted SNAP benefits for so many of our families. And as a product of someone that grew up on SNAP, that is something that federally we must make sure that we never find ourselves in something like that. And then finally, I'm a proponent of Medicare for all. It's the fiscally responsible, economically viable, logical mode for our country to adopt to. And from the 33 modern countries in the world, 32 of them have a universal health care model in place because our candidates and elected officials are bought on both sides of the aisle by big insurance and big pharma.
And you still are dealing with the reality of Republican president, at least for 2 more years, perhaps Republican majority in the Senate. So how do you enact these things, Mr. Simmons?
You know, in the state Senate, I'm really proud to have led the fight to pass the child tax credit. It took 3 years, but that is putting tax dollars back in the pockets of our working parents all across Illinois. I'm proud to have led the fight on that. I'm also proud to have led the fight working with Governor Pritzker to pass the medical debt relief program, which passed in 2024 and already has cleared medical debt for 520,000 households in the state of Illinois. I want to take that type of energy and effective work to the federal government where we don't see it. And the reality is that when we look at the Trump administration and we look at the Democrats that are serving in Congress, a lot of them fold before the fight has even started. And I really believe that we need a different type of leader right now. And I'm running as a different type of Democrat who has the lived experiences, actually understanding what it's like to live in the 9th District and go to bed hungry, to grow up in the 9th District as a kid and watch my mother make undignified choices between paying the rent to keep her small business open or having health care for her kids. The other candidates that were on this stage earlier don't have those lived experiences. I do, and I've also done something about it in the state Senate, which means I've got the receipts and the legislation to show that I can do the things that are in my platform, such as passing Medicare for all, such as passing the child tax credit at the federal level, and passing universal basic income for all families in our country.
Mr. Andrew, what are the things that are doable across the aisle when it comes to tackling the rising cost of health care, the rising cost of housing, goods, utilities?
Well, the reality is that some red states and red districts are starting to feel the impact of the rise in the affordable health care premiums. And recognizing that, I think that creates an opportunity. But I think, you know, some of the rhetoric that you hear from the Democratic Party that is all just attacking instead of actually doing. And the reality is and it's real, that this administration is using threat, intimidation, and violence to tear at our very democratic institutions. But the reality is that there is an opportunity here to be working with others. And this district represents that, a district that is very, very diverse, from all the way from Uptown to Cary and Algonquin. I've walked in those districts. I've spent a lot of time with our businesses. The number of small businesses that are hurting right now and need relief around healthcare, tariffs, a strategic plan in this country that starts investing in education and taking on things like automation and AI. But we are ineffective as a Congress, and it makes us ineffective as a country. And until we start working together, it's division that is sometimes our greatest threat.
All right, Ms. Amawala, you know, we got to the issue of immigration and ICE. You know, we've seen 2 of the 3 panelists on our previous panel be out there banging on cars, protesting at Broadview. Is that an approach that you would take as a congressperson, activism beyond just legislating?
So I was there as well with the other 2 panelists as well, protesting at Broadview's processing facility, and I happened to correct them that it's not a detention center, it's a processing facility. The first time I was outside Broadview was in 2019. We had an interfaith peace circle outside as a means for peaceful protest to ensure that we draw attention to something that otherwise would not have gotten the light of day that it should have received. The second thing is one of the only detention centers that was in our state was in McHenry County. We were a part of the organizing effort and group back in 2017, well before Operation Midway Blitz, well before this Trump 2.0. And for candidates that assume that this started just recently, it's a definite miss, that this is something that activism must be in partnership. And we founded the very first rapid response group in our community in Skokie, Illinois, because when the very first ICE kidnapping took place, we made sure that we educated our local businesses on knowing their rights if and when they come in contact with ICE. And that's something I'm really proud of having a track record doing as well.
Mr. Simmons, what about your role in terms of activism, in terms of assisting folks that have been caught up in being arrested and being harassed by federal agents? What have you done?
Yeah, you know, I talk about my work as a state senator during Operation Midway Blitz. Listen, I was in Rogers Park on the streets. I was helping my constituents feel comforted when ICE thugs with masks were roving streets, were kidnapping people, were abducting people. On a Sunday morning in October, I was patrolling Western Avenue in front of a Mexican-owned supermarket, Morelia, when a neighbor was abducted from a car within 100 yards of me. The ICE agents smashed the windows, took him out of the car, left the car seat in the car, left the identification and his kid's medication. What I did is I got to make sure the car was secured. I called the Secretary of State's office to make sure that we got the car back to the family. And then I went to Broadview and I demanded that they give me the key so I could give it back to his wife. And it took 3 hours. They kept me, a state senator, sitting outside in the cold outside of Broadview for 3 hours. And someone came to the door with a mask on and just handed me the key, like something from out of medieval Europe. And so that is where I have been in this fight. I've been passing legislation in the state Senate, as we did in the veto session, that gives us the right to sue ICE agents, keeping ICE agents away from our daycare centers. We saw a teacher yanked up at 7 a.m. from an early childhood facility right outside of my Senate district. I helped to pass legislation to keep them away from those facilities, to keep them away from higher education facilities, to keep them out of our hospitals. And that's the same thing that we need in Congress right now. At the same time, I've been at the rallies. I've been in deep with the rapid response networks that have been created from scratch and supporting them. I'm bringing forth legislation this spring in the state Senate that would create a $50 million fund to stabilize businesses that were affected by Operation Midway Blitz. So this work is deep for me.
So the two of you have been involved. Phil, Andrew, does this moment require you to be out there in assisting folks in the way that we've heard from some of these other candidates?
Well, I've always been out there.
And you have a history as a hostage negotiator and working for the FBI.
That's right. And working with communities that have disproportionately been affected by violence. And this is really no difference. It requires the highest level of accountability. And that's not what we've seen. How ICE agents have been recruited, their background checks, how they've been trained and then deployed with an ideological motivation instead of a public safety objective. And we need to rein that in until they are ready to coordinate with local, state, and federal authorities to really target public safety. And this is not how it's done. It's not done by a one-time granting of a $145 billion expenditure to try to grow an agency quicker than it can with any level of responsibility. ICE, as it exists right now, is dangerous. I don't encourage people to engage ICE.
Is there
but
any?
I think that it's really important that we be patient because our court system is the right place for this accountability.
And there certainly have been a lot of cases.
That's right, right here in the Seventh
Circuit. And the
Circuit.
DOJ has basically lost pretty much every case that they've tried to bring against protesters.
Because the evidence and the underlying actions and behavior, and sometimes even the deception and the lying by ICE agents doesn't survive in court. So I don't encourage people to engage on the street. I do think that accountability in our court system, particularly here in Chicago in the Seventh Circuit, which is functioning, that is the place for accountability. But more importantly, who we send to Congress with the experience in public safety, in national security, to bring that level of oversight and accountability, which is exactly what Congress's constitutional responsibility is.
And there has been efforts from Congress members to conduct oversight of Broadview. Some of them have been turned away, some of them got in. Ms. Amawala, I'll ask the question I asked on the other panel. Is there any scenario, say federal agents have a line on a criminal, someone's accused or convicted of a violent crime, and that's undocumented, should local authorities cooperate?
This is why we are a sanctuary state. It's to exactly prevent that type of work, because ICE as an institution cannot be trusted to take something like that and that information as such and do right with it. I mean, ICE does not uphold due process, so in what world would they actually be able to prosecute someone who might have a criminal backing in that instance? I don't think there's a world in which that can tactfully exist with the way that ICE exists right now in our country.
Mr. Simmons, is there any scenario, a violent criminal, someone accused of rape, someone accused of attempted murder, and ICE says to the local authorities, can you help us find him? No?
Illinois is a sanctuary state. It is a matter of law, settled law in Illinois, that law enforcement is not allowed to cooperate with ICE. I was proud to vote for that legislation in 2021. It's known as the Trust Act, and that is where I always will be. Listen, Illinois is a sanctuary state. My dad was able to be granted asylum in Illinois because Illinois welcomes immigrants, and that is where the public policy is in our state. That is the position that I have.
Mr. Andrew, I mean, is there any scenario? We know there are sanctuary protections, but some folks in city council have talked about maybe we modify that. So if it is the worst of the worst and ICE needs some assistance from local law enforcement, they should get that. What do you think?
Absolutely. If somebody in a community is terrorizing them, threatening them, and using criminal behavior to disadvantage those communities, we have to remove them. And the people that are being most affected by that are the migrant community. But the reality is that the best way, the most comprehensive way of deploying an effective public safety strategy is including the community. You have to have trust with the community because the community is the most affected. And where we've seen it in Chicago, whether it be with migrants that have criminal backgrounds that involve violence, or other individuals who are terrorizing and hurting our communities, you need the cooperation of communities, but you also need a coordinated, responsible, and constitutional response from law enforcement.
All right, so a difference of opinion on this issue. Yeah, Mr. Simmons.
Can I just say that in the case of people who have broken the law enforcement already can do its law enforcement activities. That is the prerogative of the Chicago Police Department and every police department, including the state police of the state of Illinois. ICE is an agency that has to go. There is no reforming an agency that breaks the law at every turn, abducts people, violates their constitutional rights, and asks the questions later. I don't understand how such an agency could be reformed or repackaged in any form, which is why I'm proud to, as part of my platform, say that we need to abolish ICE and not use them for anything. And we also need to abolish the private prisons that are holding a lot of our neighbors that have been abducted, who I would add, many of whom are U.S. citizens and shouldn't have been abducted by ICE to begin with. ICE has lost all credibility on this as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's an interesting issue. I mean, and you all said this on the main broadcast, that you wanted to abolish ICE as it stands now. Maybe a little bit of difference in terms of how to enforce federal immigration law. What about those private detention centers? There's a big push now from the Trump administration to open up these detention centers. How do you stop that in Congress?
It's the same way that we see right now. The same folks that are buying up stocks on these private prisons are the same ones that have unique vested interests in making sure that we are privatizing our criminal justice system. There are people whose pocketbooks are being lined by every single black and brown person that gets picked up in the street, whether it be by ICE as an institution or whether it be by our own law enforcement. So the same people that are not calling for the banning of congressional stock trading are the same ones that are in favor of privatized prisons and detention centers. I'm not surprised at the correlation.
Mr. Andrew, what about that, the proliferation here and how to stop that? Because it seems like in red districts and blue districts, folks are getting a little worried about that.
And they should. This is an example of money in politics. We're seeing people lobby this administration. They're benefiting from federal expenditure to purchase these buildings, and they're getting the benefit from it. And with the insider trading of specific members of Congress who, by the way, have not voted to ban insider trading in Congress.
Are there names that anyone can drop in terms of who has supported this, who might see a benefit?
They just had a recent vote I think it's pretty easy to find the names.
So the vote on banning insider trading, the folks that are voting against that, we should kind of take a look at those names.
And certainly anybody that thinks that it is their right to be insider trading while they're in Congress. And this is why people have lost faith in our system. And we have an opportunity right now, one, in the 9th Congressional District, to do something vastly different and elect someone that does not come out of this political melee where money drives policy and then continue to be elected and make a career out of it. We can do something very different here as other districts are around the country. Send the right people to Congress who on January 2027 can institute these reforms and insulate the federal government from undue money and power.
All right, speaking of doing something different, let's ask a question we didn't get to in the first debate, the issue of Epstein. There are reports now that the Department of Justice has allegedly held back documents from the FBI where they interviewed an accuser of President Trump. This is a developing story. Ms. Amawala, if Democrats take control of Congress, would you vote to haul Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, folks on both sides of the aisle that are in these files to come testify before Congress?
Absolutely. I don't see why partisanship should result in any immunity. To me, if you're a criminal, and you should be prosecuted and held accountable regardless of what position of power you hold in our country right now. I'm sick and tired of seeing it be Democrats versus Republicans when it's clearly bought versus unbought right now. And even the Epstein files that we saw released had most of it redacted anyway. So absolutely. And that is why in this district right now, we see that 22% of voters are undecided because they keep seeing the media push these three candidates that clearly aren't filling the itch that we are looking for as voters. Someone who has a consistent, proven track record, someone who has lived in this community their entire life and has served elected office and have been able to do things for our neighbors, not just trying to get to know them for the first time. And I'm proud to be serving alongside my fellow panelists who also have that record in place, who I'm sure would have a similar answer on this too.
Let me just say, these two debates will live online and digital, and they will be in the same. There's no advantage to one or the other, so folks can click on them and YouTube them however they like. Mr. Simmons, what about that? This report about Donald Trump, where the DOJ apparently did not post these FBI documents. Would you vote to have Mr. Trump testify before Congress, other folks?
Not only would I vote that way, but I would also champion and lead on it. Listen, the Epstein saga has shown us that the political class in our country is wildly out of sync with the American people. This is what has led to the rise of Donald Trump. This is what has led to so many people that just don't vote. And the reality is that 22% of people who are undecided in our district are people that are not watching the horse trading. They don't care about who's raised the most money. They don't care about which particular poll said what on any given day of the week. They want to know who's coming to their doors and who's talking to them about the affordability crisis, who's talking to them about the fact that fascism is taking over our country live on our watches, and what are we doing about it? Just last week, I was talking to a constituent in Buena Park, and the next thing you know, somebody called the police on me as a black elected official, as a sitting state senator in that community. We have so much to recover in our country right now, and the Epstein files, I think, is just a metaphor for a lot of the dysfunction that we see with career politicians who don't bring any new ideas or different approaches to any of these issues, and are just looking to move up the ladder.
You're an FBI guy, Mr. Andrew. When you look at this report, it started with NPR. They had investigated these files that the DOJ apparently did not disclose or did not put out there with all the other files, where the FBI has followed up and interviewed an accuser of President Trump. What do you make of that?
There's just no question. This should never have been politicized. This should not be in the hands of Congress. This should have been in a healthy Justice Department, and it should already have been prosecuted. Democrat, Republican, wherever. You see what's going on overseas.
It seems like a cover-up, right? There should have been more prosecutions than that happened.
There is no question that this is a cover-up. This is a delay tactic. The Epstein files not only undermine our faith in a criminal justice system, and we are not seeing justice, and those victims, their justice is delayed. But look at what's going on in Europe. They're recognizing the intelligence threat that this has created. There is no way that Epstein on an island was able to pull off sex trafficking like this at the magnitude, with the number of high-level